Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another Bracketology update. Today, we're going to be looking at the latest Bracketology by Joe Lenardi, which was released on Tuesday morning. A crazy weekend of college basketball and also a crazy night of basketball as we had Auburn falling on the road to Texas A&M and BYU winning in a crazy double overtime game against Iowa State. So March is here and the tournament is just around the corner. Let's go ahead and waste no time, get into the latest bracketology. Starting with the bracket watch, the top overall seed is Auburn. And Auburn, like I mentioned, the past couple of bracketology updates, they should be locked in into the top overall seed, barring just some epic collapse by them. But they should be the top overall seed come tournament time. First team out is Oklahoma. Oklahoma did fall to Ole Miss on over the weekend, so we'll see if Oklahoma can bounce back in the midweek. And then last team in out in the Mountain West is Boise State. So that's the bracket watch. Now let's move on to the teams on the bubble, starting with the last four byes. Baylor, San Diego State, Georgia, and Indiana. So those four teams at the moment are still safely in the tournament. Last four in, Ohio State. They got a big win last night against Nebraska. Arkansas, big win on the road against Vanderbilt in Nashville. Nebraska and Ohio State just played last night. And Boise State, like we mentioned, out of the Mountain West is in the last four in. First four out teams are Oklahoma, Xavier, North Carolina, and Texas. Texas did get a win last night against Mississippi State in overtime. North Carolina got a win against Virginia Tech. But North Carolina, ultimately, if they get in or not, is going to come down to if they can beat Duke on Saturday. So that will be a big game for Tar Heel fans to watch out for. And the next four out, these are pretty much teams that just have to make a deep run or ultimately win their respective conference tournament. Those teams are SMU, Cincinnati, Villanova, and Wake Forest. So let's go ahead and go through the 68-team bracket to see what teams are moving up, moving down, and who's new to the field. So Bucknell is one of those teams new to the field. They would be a 16 seed facing off against Southern, so that would be a playing game in Dayton, Ohio. The 12 seeds would feature Nebraska, who's moving down. Boise State is new to the field as well. Quinnipiac is up to a 16 seed and also new to the field. They would face off against Southeast Missouri State in the 16 seed play-in. And then the 11 seed play-in would feature Ohio State, who's moving up, and Arkansas, who's moving down. But both of those teams should be moving up after they got some big-time wins last night. So let's move ahead to the South region. Like we mentioned, Bucknell is one of those teams new to the field. Nebraska, like we mentioned, is down, and Boise State is also new to the field. Indiana is up to an 11 seed, while Illinois is up to a 7 seed. Illinois really needed that victory over the weekend against Michigan. They put up 93 against the Wolverines. So Illinois, a team that's been dealing with a lot of injuries and a lot of players dealing with sickness, looks like this team is finally playing good at the right time. And then Bryant, who's up to a 15 seed in the South. Moving on to the East, Quinnipiac, like we mentioned, is a new team to the field. UConn's up to an 8 seed. St. John's is up to a 3 seed after they clinched the regular season title in the Big East. Georgia is new to the field as they've been on the bubble, but now they have moved safely into the field. I think that Georgia should be safely in, barring if there's like any major bubble burstings over the next couple of weeks. Kansas is down to a 7 seed after their recent loss to Texas Tech. And VCU out of the A10 is up to a 10 seed. So that's the top portion. Now let's move on to the bottom portion. In the West, Tennessee has moved up to a 1 seed. So there was a little bit of discrepancies. If Florida, Alabama, or Tennessee would be that last number 1 seed, but looks like it's the Volunteers getting that spot. Norfolk State's down to a 16. New Mexico down to a 9 seed. Chattanooga up to a 13, and Northern Colorado is also new to the field in the West. Now let's go on to the Midwest. Ole Miss down to an 8 seed, but they did get a good win against Oklahoma at home. Texas A&M is down to a 4. They were struggling, but maybe they'll get back up to a 3 seed after that big-time win against number 1 Auburn last night. Louisville out of the ACC is up to a 6. Ohio State and Arkansas both moving up and moving down in the field. Jacksonville State is new to the field and also a 14 seed. So Liberty, Jacksonville State are going to be the top 2 teams in the Conference USA tournament. Alabama's down to a 2 seed after really holding the surge of being a 1 seed. South Alabama out of the Sun Belt is a 15 seed. So let's go ahead, as always. Let's get into our predictions. As I always mention, I use pdffiller.com. So if you want to go ahead and practice and fill out some bracketologies, definitely feel free to do that. So we will go ahead and do that at the moment. So let's go on now to the top left portion of the bracket, and we'll be filling this out until we have our national pick. So number one overall, Auburn would face off against Southern. Bucknell would have Southern ultimately winning the 16th seed, but Auburn should have no problem against whoever comes out of that game. So give me Auburn to move on. Number 8 seed Creighton and number 9 seed Utah State. Always look forward to these 8-9 games, and this will be a fantastic game to watch. But both teams have been struggling lately. But given the experience of Creighton, I think that they move on at least for one more game. And then Clemson versus Nebraska, and Boise would have Boise ultimately winning that game. But I think that Clemson would just be a little bit too much for both of those teams. So give me the Clemson Tigers moving on. Purdue, the 4 seed versus number 13 High Point. Don't see Purdue having really any trouble against High Point. So give me the Boilermakers to move on to the second round. Then we have St. Mary's in Indiana in the 6 and 11. If you haven't really watched St. Mary's this season, they have just been a dominant force in the West Coast Conference. So give me the Gales of St. Mary's. So we have the 6th seed moving on there. Kentucky and Utah Valley. Kentucky just drubbed LSU last night. So even with the injury to Jackson Robinson, they're still looking pretty good. But give me Kentucky to move on against Utah Valley. Illinois and San Diego State in the 7 and the 10. Give me Illinois in that one. San Diego State's defense would definitely give Illinois some trouble, though. I think that Illinois would just be too much for them. And then Iowa State and Bryant, pretty easy pick for me. I think that Iowa State, I mean, this has been a team that I watched last night against BYU. I mean, they lost that game, but that was just a terrific basketball game to watch. So give me Iowa State. They're definitely going to be a tough out in the tournament. And then number 1 seed Auburn versus number 8 seed Creighton. Don't see a major upset here. Give me the Auburn Tigers moving on to play another day. And then number 5 Clemson and number 4 Purdue. Going to go for a little upset here with the 5 over the 4. Give me Clemson out of the ACC to move on. And then St. Mary's in Kentucky, 6 versus 3. Give me another upset here. I think that St. Mary's definitely has the talent to pull off this upset. So give me St. Mary's, the Gales, to move on to the Sweet 16. Then Illinois and Iowa State would definitely be a tough matchup for Iowa State, but I think that they get the job done. Give me the Cyclones to continue their march on. And then number 1 seed Auburn and number 5 seed Clemson in the Battle of the Tigers. I think that Auburn, even with the loss last night to Texas A&M, should really have no worry for them. They pretty much clinched already the regular season title in the SEC. So give me Auburn. And St. Mary's and Iowa State, you know what? We haven't gave St. Mary's any respect on this show. Let's have St. Mary's go on to the Elite Eight to face off against Auburn. So we have number 6 seed St. Mary's versus number 1 seed Auburn, where I ultimately have the Auburn Tigers moving on to the Final Four. And the first time since a couple of years, I believe it was 2019, the last time that Auburn has made it to the Final Four. Let's move on now to Duke's region, where they would face off against Quinnipiac and Southeast Missouri State. Without Southeast Missouri State winning the play-in, but ultimately fall into Duke. Duke has just been a freight train through the ACC this season, so give me the Blue Devils. UConn and Vanderbilt, one of the best 8-9 matchups that I have seen in these bracketologies. But ultimately, I am going to go with UConn there. The defending 2-time national champs live to see another day in this tournament. Maryland and Drake, 5 versus 12. I love Drake as a 12-seed upset, but I just think that Maryland is just too good to get out this early. And then Arizona and Akron. We haven't done this in a bracketology, pulling off a 13 over 4. And let's go ahead and do it here. I think that Akron is a very dangerous number 13 seed, so definitely watch out for them. As long as they take care of business in the MAC conference tournament, I think that the Zips should be a team that you do not want to face in the first round of this tournament. Going to go with another upset, as we also have Georgia pulling off the 11 over 6 upset over UCLA. Georgia is one of those teams in the SEC that you also don't want to face off either. A lot of firepower on that team. St. John's and Towson in the 3 versus the 14. Going to roll with the Fighting Rick Pitino's in this one. Though Towson would definitely be a scary 14 seed to deal with, St. John's would really have no problem there. Kansas and VCU going to go with another upset. This is a region of upsets so far. I have VCU over Kansas. Kansas, the way they've been playing recently, I'm just out on this team fully. They were a preseason number one. They're not even playing like a preseason top 25 team at this rate. So give me VCU. Florida and Robert Morris. Give me Florida, the Gators, to move on there. Then Duke versus UConn. This would be a terrific second round game. I mean, who would have thought we've seen this one in the second round? The preseason, they were both top 10 teams, but facing in the second round, where I ultimately had the number one seed Duke moving on there. And Maryland, Akron. Do we have Akron Cinderella story moving on? No, we do not. I think that Maryland will get them there, so give me Maryland. And then Georgia and St. John's going to continue to roll with the chalk here, go with the Johnnies out of the Big East, so give me St. John's. VCU versus Florida. Man, I love this VCU team. They've just been playing with fire, but Florida, there's too much firepower there, so give me the Gators. And then number one seed Duke and number 5 seed Maryland. Man, I would love to pull off this upset, but I just think that Duke is just too much for them. And then St. John's and Florida would be a great game, but I am going to continue to roll with the chalk here. Going to go with Florida. And Duke versus Florida, I think that a lot of people are very high on Duke, but you know what? I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go with Florida. So we have already 2 SEC teams in the Final Four. So we'll see if we have any more from that conference in the dance. So a 1 seed and a 2 seed so far. As we move down to the Tennessee Volunteers region, where we have Tennessee, the 1 seed versus number 16 seed Norfolk State. I think that Tennessee as well should have no problem there. And then number 8 seed BYU, number 9 New Mexico, another terrific matchup. But man, BYU is about as hot as you can be when it comes to this tournament time. And then Missouri and Yale. Yale is bound to pull off an upset, but I just think that this Missouri team, I just don't really see an upset right there. And then Michigan and Chattanooga. I am going to continue with Michigan, though they haven't been playing well down the stretch. But I think that the Wolverines at least pick up 1 victory in this tournament. Marquette, UC San Diego. UC San Diego has also been that 11 seed that I like to pick in these tournaments. So give me UC San Diego to pull off the upset against number 6 seed Marquette. Then we have Texas Tech and Northern Colorado in the 3 versus 14. Give me the Red Raiders to move on there. And Mississippi State and West Virginia, these are just 2 teams that have been up and down all season, but I'm going to give the nod to the Bulldogs. Give me Mississippi State to move on to the second round. And then Michigan State versus Central Connecticut State. Give me Michigan State to move on there. And then we have number 1 seed Tennessee, number 8 BYU. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to stay consistent. I'm going to pull off the upset of BYU there. It's nothing to discredit Tennessee, but man, this BYU team is like not even playing close to being 8 seed. They're playing close to a number 1 seed that we've been playing down the stretch in the Big 12. So give me the major upset. It always happens. So give me BYU. And then Missouri and Michigan, actually give me Missouri to move on there. I like this Missouri team out of the SEC. So give me Missouri to move on. So we have an 8-5 matchup in the Sweet 16. So that's definitely going to be an exciting matchup to look forward to. And then UC San Diego and Texas Tech. UC San Diego's runs in here. Give me Texas Tech. And then Mississippi State and Michigan State. We saw this same matchup, and it's going to be the same outcome as Michigan State is going to move on there. So we have BYU, Missouri, Texas Tech, and Michigan State. Now let's move on. BYU versus number 5 seed Missouri. I'm going to continue BYU's run for at least 1 more game. Give me BYU to continue their run to the Elite 8. And then Texas Tech and Michigan State, both of these teams I've had in the Final Four in the past, but only one could go, and I'm going to go with Michigan State to move on there. So we have BYU and Michigan State, and let's go ahead and put Michigan State in there. So we have another 2 seed advancing on. So we have Michigan State ending BYU's Cinderella story run there. So give me Tom Izzo and the boys to move on. So now let's move on to the final region where we have number 1 seed Houston versus number 16 seed Omaha. Give me Houston to move on there. And then Ole Miss and Gonzaga are going to go with my first 9/8 upset. Go with the Zags out of the West Coast Conference. So we have another 5 versus 12 with Oregon and McNeese. Give me my most popular upset so far. Give me McNeese to move on and beat Oregon. I know that Oregon has definitely been playing well. And they always play well in these tournaments, but there's something about this McNeese team that's just catching my eye. Texas A&M and Lipscomb. If it wasn't for A&M winning last night, I probably would have picked Lipscomb. But I am back on the Texas A&M train just for a little bit. So give me Texas A&M to move on there. And then Louisville versus the winner of Ohio State, Arkansas. Give me Arkansas, and actually give me Arkansas to pull off the upset there. against Louisville. We've seen it in the past where we see these playing teams make it to a deep run. We saw last year with NC State. We'll see if we have the same scenario play out this season. Then we have Wisconsin versus Jacksonville State in the 3 versus 14. Give me the Badgers to move on there. They should have no problem. And then Memphis and Baylor. Give me 7 seed Memphis to move on there. And to close out the first round, we have Alabama versus South Alabama, a good old-fashioned in-state rivalry game where we have the Crimson Tide moving on to play another game. And then we have number 1 seed Houston and number 9 seed Gonzaga. Give me Houston to move on there. So we have all of our 1 seeds except for Tennessee advancing on. Then we have McNeese versus Texas A&M. Man, if Texas A&M could play like they did last season, they could pretty much beat anybody. And I think that they continue on their march and beat McNeese. Number 11 seed Arkansas and number 3 seed Wisconsin. I am going to continue rolling with the Badgers there. So we have all top 3 seeds moving on so far. And then we have Memphis versus Alabama. This would be a heck of a game to watch, but I am going to go with the 2 seed Alabama moving on there. And we have number 1 seed Houston versus number 4 seed Texas A&M. Don't really see an upset there. Houston's too powerful of a team, so give me the Houston Cougars. And then number 3 seed Wisconsin versus number 2 seed Alabama. I'm actually going to give Wisconsin some flowers. Give me Wisconsin, the Badgers, to move on and pull off a little bit of an upset there. So we have Wisconsin versus Houston, where I ultimately have Houston moving on there. So I know it's a little bit of a chalky bracket. I have pretty much 2 1 seeds and 2 2 seeds, but that's just how I see it in this bracketology update. So our first matchup is Auburn versus Michigan State. It would be a great game to watch, where I ultimately have Auburn moving on to the national championship. And number 2 seed Florida versus number 1 seed Houston. I'm going to go with Houston. So we have a battle of the 1 seeds there with Auburn and Houston. And I'm going to continue to be consistent here on this channel. Give me the Auburn Tigers. Really not worried even with the loss to Texas A&M. This is still one of the best teams in the country, and that's how I have it. So let me know who you have cutting down the nets. We are just, like I mentioned at the start, we are just weeks away from finding out the field of 68. So definitely an exciting time to be a college basketball fan. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in to today's video, and I will catch y'all next time. So long for now.